Good morning. We're thrilled to have you all here today for a topic that's not just relevant, but absolutely vital right now. Changes in public procurement and their impact on schools and trusts. With the Procurement Act shaking things up, we're diving into what these changes mean for you, how they transform procurement practices, and the essential steps schools and trusts should take to navigate this new landscape. We're especially excited to be joined by the one and only Nathan Swinney, our Head of Procurement. If you've attended our webinars before, you will know that Nathan brings a wealth of knowledge and a dash of humour to the table. He's dedicated to helping schools and trusts not only comply with regulations, but also optimise their procurement process for maximum efficiency. Good morning, Nathan.
Also a little crazy. You have to be a little crazy to work in procurement. Good morning, Victoria. Morning, everyone. Preparing for change. I don't know about you lot, but there seems to be too much change in the world these days. I'd like a little bit of stability, but nevertheless, change is thrust upon us like that awkward relative at the family Christmas gathering that you don't want to see, but you have to see. So here we are. We've ascended Mount Procurement. Just off in the distance, we can see Christmas. 40 days to go, Victoria. Are you ready, Victoria, for Christmas?
I am, and as we embark on that journey together, or not together on Christmas Day, Nathan, but we do encourage you to make this session as interactive as possible. So do feel free to drop your questions into the chat at any time, because we do want to hear your thoughts. So don't hold back and let's make this a lively discussion this morning. So without further ado, Nathan, let's kick things off. And can you give us a quick update on the Procurement Act 2023?
Yes, I can. So, right, when we last left things, there was a delay put in for the go live of the Act. So originally the Act was meant to go live in October. I think there was a collective sigh of relief when there was a ministerial update to say that that would be pushed back to the 24th of February. So the new go live date is now the 24th of February. But beware, folks, that is not long. I've just said 40 days to Christmas. Believe it or not, yes, that won't be long thereafter. And we all know how ridiculously crazy January can be. So we'll come on to preparations shortly. Now, obviously, it still remains the case that any current procurements currently underway, or if you issue a contract notice or what we call a prior information notice, if that's issued before the 24th of February, then that remains valid. It will just be valid under the current procurement regulations, which we all lovingly know as PCR 2015. One of the reasons for the delay is to do with what's called the National Procurement Policy Statement, the NPPS. So this is one of the reasons that the new Labour government delayed the Procurement Act, and this was actually mentioned in the budget for those of you who were brave enough to read that. But the National Procurement Policy Statement is now under consultation. Labour had a slightly different slant on it, shall we say, in terms of what they would like to put in that. And for those of you who may not be aware, the National Procurement Policy Statement will be something that you have to have regard to in procurement, and we'll cover things like social value, economic benefits, etc. So it's an extra piece of guidance and legislation on top of the Procurement Act. So that is currently under consultation, and allegedly will be ready in time for the go live of 24th of February. Whether that's the case remains to be seen. They only just started the consultation earlier this month, so I'm not sure. Maybe the Cabinet Office are working over Christmas, who knows. So we're expecting an update either way on the National Procurement Policy Statement. And yeah, hopefully we'll have something before February anyway that will help provide guidance. And just a reminder that there is a deadline for expiry. So I mentioned that current procurements and current contracts that are procured under PCR 2015, they remain current. However, there is an obligation to re-procure those by February 2029. Now, crazy to think of 2029. It's in the future, but obviously that is 4 years from when the new Act goes live. So you'll have 4 years with which to replace. I would imagine most frameworks and contracts will need to be replaced and reprocured by then anyway. But for those of you who maybe have a longer term solution, just to be mindful of that. So there is also another little update that I gleaned this morning from the Tinterweb, which is around the new central digital platform, which is currently going through testing. So again, that's another little update. So everything is yes, moving forward, apparently, and we wait with bated breath for the latest updates as they come through. There is an alert you can sign up to with the Transforming Public Procurement. So if you just put Transforming Public Procurement into your browser, you can sign up for alerts, and that'll give you updates if you want those, of course. Okay, so in terms of just a little reminder on the new Procurement Act, I assume most people were actually in the last webinar where we went into a little bit more detail. There's only so much we can do in 20 minutes, but just a quick reminder that the new Procurement Act does unify all procurement regulation into one, although thinking about it, there will be still two procurement regulations. The PCR 15 will obviously, for those that are currently procured under that and contracts that are procured under that, that'll still remain. But obviously, any new procurement from the 24th of February will be under the one single regulation, which is helpful. There are now simplified procurement routes, which we'll go on to shortly, which are down to 3. However, one of the vast updates has been around the number of notices. So these are things like contract notice, contract termination notices, contract performance notices, contract award notices, contract details notices. I could go on forever. But these are a lot more in depth and obviously around transparency. That probably is the keynote update around the new Procurement Act. The central digital platform, as I mentioned, they're just testing that, but all of this will go through that central digital platform, and obviously the creation of a new procurement review unit who will act as a little bit of an auditing type function for contracting authorities, and a new regime around supplier debarment, which remains an interesting one to see how that'll pan out. But that's to do with where suppliers who are found to be not performing or have fallen foul of public procurement, they will be barred from future engagement with public procurement, unless they can obviously improve and convince Cabinet Office that they are worthy of engaging in public procurement. So that is really just a very, very brief snapshot of some of the top level things. Just to remind, in terms of the routes to market available, we have the good old classic and well-loved open procedure. There are some changes to that, but it's a very much as the same as to what folks will be familiar with in terms of a typical tender procedure. I think the next slide I'll be going into a little bit of a process flow around that. The competitive flexible procedure, which is new, which is a pretty much a design your own procurement procedure. Again, lots of interest as to how that will pan out and how that will work, but there is increasing guidance being released on that, as well as increasing numbers of template documents that are available via Cabinet Office. So encourage you to check those out. There will continue to be options for direct awards, but they will be limited. That's where you can award a contract without competition, but be wary. There are limited circumstances there, and that is obviously open to scrutiny and a lot of transparency requests. And yes, open frameworks and dynamic markets, for those familiar with framework arrangements, dynamic purchasing systems at the moment. Slight tweaks to those, some improvements in my view, around how you can have a framework but periodically reopen it. Again, these are new procedures, new routes to market, which are an improvement upon the current ones, I would say, and they do sort of provide options there for contracting authorities accordingly. So if we just delve quickly into the open procedure, Victoria, if that's okay, we have a little sort of process flow. So next slide. Yep, there we go. So this is comes from the guidance around competitive tendering procedures. So for those who are not aware, the government commercial function has released quite a lot of guidance documents. Now, be wary, there is a lot to read, but I would encourage you to access those. So again, if you just Google Government Commercial Function Procurement Act guidances, you will see quite a raft of guidance documents in there. And this is just something we lifted from there, which just goes through the typical open procedure. So this is a tender process, which as I go through, it will probably be quite familiar to a lot of folks. So there is an optional preliminary market engagement stage for those who wish to undertake that prior to a tender. There is a lot more emphasis in this act around procurement market engagement, just to be mindful of that. The development of a procurement strategy, of course. You would then develop the tender notice and associated tender documents, including something called conditions of participation and award criteria, which is your supplier selection type stuff. You would then invite tenders by publishing the tender notice and associated tender documents on what is now the central digital platform. You have to allow at least a minimum time period for potential suppliers to submit tenders. You receive those tenders. Obviously, you deal with clarification. All very familiar stuff. You would then check exclusions once the deadline is passed and assess tenders against any conditions of participation. So compliance matters, mandatory exclusion, that sort of thing. Evaluate the tenders against the award criteria and determine the most advantageous tender. So before that was most economically advantageous tender. It's now MAT, not MEET. So all you folks out there called MAT, you're now famous. Inform suppliers of the outcome and issue something called assessment summaries. So previously you would issue Alcatel notices and standstill notices. There is now something called an assessment summary, following which you then publish the contract award notice, which triggers the voluntary standstill. So there's a little bit of switch your mind over. The contract award notice comes first, and then it's the standstill period. Following completion of that, and just note the standstill period is now 8 working days, not 10 calendar days. You can then, once you've got through there, subject to no challenge, you can then publish what's called the contract details notice, and you're also obliged to publish a copy of the contract itself. So the contract details notice is what we would have called previously the contract award notice. Don't be scared. This is just a snapshot as to the process. So it is an open procedure, but not as we know it, Jim, to quote Star Trek. So it is a similar process. It's all familiar, but with a little twist on there. So that's just a little snapshot as to the sort of some of the things in the new Procurement Act.
Thanks, Nathan. The Act is going to significantly impact school procurement practices then, but it does aim to streamline process. The open procedure is a single stage for your tenders, and also it does emphasise social value in your purchasing decisions. So Nathan, what practical steps can schools undertake to prepare for the new Procurement Act?
Yes, this is a good question. I did think of putting one slide on that just said panic, but I didn't think that would be very helpful. So no reason to panic, folks. No reason to panic at all. We just need, like anything, like with any change, you just need to break it down into some steps and just think calmly and carefully what's required. Here's Nathan's top tips. Okay.
Before you go on to that, Nathan,
yeah.
we have a question about, well, more of a comment that
or a heckle.
They're concerned just on that point of the panic. They have concerns about the amount of new admin. There is only one of them and have 30 schools. The schools don't have specific procurement staff, so they're going to struggle with this. So that's kind of around your comment of don't panic.
Yes. Well, yes. Yeah, I get it. And I think, yes, I understand. And I think, yes, there is going to be a lot of admin. all I can say is everybody's in the same boat. So this impacts the whole public sector. It's not just Matt's. The focus will be on everyone. So everyone's in a similar position. I've not spoken to many who are absolutely on top of this and prepared at the moment. And some of those are very senior people in very senior public. I think there will be a period of grace, and there has been lots of guidance put out there, but. Like I say, take up what you can, and I would just give yourself a bit of time to think about this. Yeah, I get there will be an admin increase undoubtedly, and this is the shift change which I think for procurement people it's kind of like we've been saying this for 20 years. Procurement isn't back office anymore. It's got to be viewed as a strategically important function now. It's got to have a seat at the top table because you can't deal with it as a back office function. It's an admin. The requirements upon procurement now are going to be huge, and I think I don't have a specific solution for that. I'm afraid. I think it is a case of making your seniors aware, making your board of trustees aware that this is something you need to take seriously, and on that in terms of the Nathan's practical steps. So I think one, have a look at a review, and if you've got a procurement strategy, I don't know how many Mats have a procurement strategy, but it would be a good idea to have one. And having a strategy in itself doesn't sort of particularly mean anything, but what it does is it emphasizes and puts procurement at the forefront of the business. It puts procurement up there. We have a strategy. We need to see through this strategy. So yeah, a procurement strategy with an action plan attached that says, look, we need to be dealing with this stuff. We need to look at all of these, and I'll come on to these other bits and pieces, and these are things that we need to be looking at. And I think a good place is a strategy. And what a strategy does is it gives you sort of top level sponsorship. Yeah, that's a good point actually. Sometimes it is absorbed into the overarching business and financial strategy. But yeah, I would say it's a good idea to review. Do you have, or at the very least, do you have procurement mentioned in your business strategy? The second point is quite an important one. Your procurement policies will soon be out of date. Now, a lot of Mats will probably have procurement as part of their financial regulations. It may be a good idea to review those or at least have a separate procurement policy, not to repeat what's in the financial regulations or the finance policies, but just to ensure that you've got some of this or most of it covered. And again, the policy work is something that, there will be opportunities to sort of work with people on that. I mean, we can possibly help with that as well. Third, access training as much as possible. We've got something on that later. There are training bits and pieces out there. The government commercial function have got training pieces, knowledge drops, etc. But it's not just about your training, but it's about awareness, guidance, and training to stakeholders in your MAT, particularly at senior level. So, is your could be a chief operating finance officer or whatever you call them, who's not on the call, are they aware? Do they need to be aware on this? So again, just think about training. One very useful practical thing would be to undertake a spend analysis. So one of the things with the Procurement Act is it's going to demand of you a lot of data management. So what are you spending? With whom? What contracts have you got in place? And that leads us on to the contracts register as well. What I would advise is, because we've got a transition from PCR 15 to the new Procurement Act, is in a contracts register, you need to list out all the current contracts you've got, their total spend values, their start and end dates, obviously who the supplier is, but I would colour code them based on, are they under PCR 15? Because those regulations will continue to apply, or are they under the new Procurement Act post 24 February. Any contract notice placed after 24th of Feb will automatically be under the new Procurement Act. But there will be I know it says it's going to be one regime of procurement, but actually it's two if you think about it, because if you've got a contract that you've awarded, say in January 2025, and you want to modify that contract in the following January 2026, the modification rules will be under the PCR 15, not the new Procurement Act. So you need to know which contracts are under which regime so you can follow the rights regime accordingly. So there is going to be a bit of sort of oh, am I wearing this hat or am I wearing that hat? But without a contracts register, that's going to be very difficult. And also, one of the requirements of the new act is to put out planned procurement notices as to what you're planning to spend, in the coming year, and there'll be a requirement to do that if it's over a certain value. So a spend analysis will help you give visibility. Who are you spending with? Where? It'll tell you or might be able to help you with what's in contract, what's not in contract, and then a contracts register. Again, even a basic spreadsheet is probably the most important tool that you will have. And from that contracts register and spend analysis, you can then devise a procurement forward plan, which is what are our procurement needs in the next year, 2 years, etc. Because again, under the new procurement regulations, over the threshold, there's a lot more rigor, there's a lot more process to get through. So having time, I always bang the drum on this, Victoria, don't I? But time is the friend or can be the enemy of procurement. So give yourself lead time. I would say for over threshold, give yourself at least 6 months lead time on those major procurements that are coming up. I remember as a MAT, you're one legal entity. So, it doesn't matter if your contract's split between 30 schools and those 30 schools individually spend under the threshold. No, what they look at is what's the total spend on that particular supplier, and that's what's caught by the regulations. Again, just think about tendering portals as well. So there is the central digital platform, but obviously e-tendering access will be helpful in this as well. So yeah, a few practical steps. Again, like I say, try not panic. I think if there's one thing in here that I would say is probably the most important is your contracts register, visibility, obviously your procurement policy. I mean, they're all important, but in a ranked area. So is that okay, Victoria? Is that
Yeah,
right?
some great advice there, Nathan, especially around the contract register and highlighting in different colours the which regulation that contract's under. Really important there. So hopefully those steps will help you effectively navigate some of the changes and maximise the benefits of the new procurement landscape. So Nathan, moving on, we have got some questions which I think we're going to take at the end, and we'll just go through them at the end. There's quite a few. So Nathan, how can schools align their procurement with their school objectives?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this goes back to that procurement strategy piece. I'm in my 20 years of doing procurement, one of the best things to start with, where it's particularly what we call greenfield, where you don't have a lot of procurement infrastructure or operating models in place. Um, the best place to start would be a procurement strategy. So I would look at you will have, I would hope, as a MAT, an overarching business strategy with priorities and objectives. So the question there is, how does procurement help and aim to support that? And does a procurement strategy align with those? Again, this is about getting top table sponsorship and engagement on procurement. How does your forward plan, procurement plan, contribute to the procurement strategy? So if you've got a spend of 10 million over the next year, that's a lot of purchasing power. So if one of your strategic aims is to improve, save money, then that's a valid a strategic aim. So how can we prioritize that with our reprocurement? It might be improve social value outcomes. Again, that gives you plenty of foresight and awareness as to how, from a strategic standpoint, you can prioritize your procurements on that basis. Where are the risks and opportunities in your procurement strategy? Again, where are you dependent upon particular suppliers? Where are the terms for that? Again, this is about understanding your contracts and your visibility. So your procurement strategy might say, well, we need to get a better handle on our contracts and put in a contracts register over the next year. Yeah, and just having a bit more of a risk-based approach to managing procurement. And this comes up quite often and something often overlooked, which is, what is your future procurement operating model? So I think one of the comments there was, well, I do procurement, but it's one part of my job and it's on top of everything else. along with scraping up dead pigeons on the playground. It's that sort of thing. So I think one of the questions, and this can be addressed in a procurement strategy, is actually, is the time come for us to employ a full-time procurement person, or engage with a provider that can provide it on a retainer basis? Because I think having a dedicated and professional procurement person, or, for those of you, dare I say, fancy a career in procurement, the majority of people end up in it by accident. Just to sort of, no one comes out of school saying, "Oh, I know what I want to be, Mum. I want to be a procurement officer," unless you're me. But maybe is this the time for you to start thinking about, do I want to do some formal procurement training and chartered institute purchasing supply? And again, that can go into your strategy. How are we training and upskilling our key people that make decisions around this? And all of this needs to go into a procurement strategy, action and delivery plan. A decent procurement strategy will give you 3 to 5 years to sort of really turn procurement from a reactive ad hoc operating type model to something that's more something that's more strategic and in control. So that was a little foray into strategic procurement planning. We don't do it justice in 20 minutes, Victoria, I'm afraid, but yeah.
No, that's absolutely fine. We have just popped up a poll around training for you to interact with there, please. So by implementing these strategies, Nathan, schools can ensure that their procurement practice not only comply with the regulations, but they're also actively contributing to their own educational mission. So with the recent changes in public procurement laws, it is more important than ever for those with procurement responsibilities to stay informed and be prepared. So we have listened to the feedback that we've received so far, and we have tailored an online training session to meet your needs, ensuring that everyone can participate from the comfort of your own space.
Yes, so, just on that, sorry to interrupt, Victoria, but in the last session we said, would anyone be interested in face-to-face? Now, I know lots of people would love to meet me in person. However, I would have split myself 60, 70 ways, because I think there was lots of people that said, oh yes, London, Dorset, Cardiff, Bristol, wherever. So I think on a practical level, I think it's probably easier to do it online. So that's why we've sort of suggested this. Sorry to interrupt, Victoria.
No, that's absolutely fine. So please do join us for a dynamic 3-hour interactive session with
fun.
Nathan. Yeah.
Make it fun. Let's make it fun.
Where you can gain vital knowledge and practical tools to navigate these changes with confidence. As Nathan says, in these webinars, he cannot give the information required or give it justice in this time.
To be honest, 3 hours is,
it's still not enough for you.
It could be a 3-day residential, to be fair, Victoria, I think. Maybe at some point.
So we're aiming to cover understand the new regulations, enhancing your procurement strategies and ensuring compliance. So do pop one of these dates into your calendars. So we're going to do one session on Monday, the 2nd of December. And the next session, if you can't make that date, is going to be on Friday.
Christmas jumpers optional.
Friday, the 31st of January. We're going to run the slot online from 9:30 till 12:30, and there will be a £60 cost, but you will have a procurement packed morning session. So the link is in the chat to register.
Could anyone wish for anything better than a procurement packed morning?
With yourself, Nathan, of course.
Well, I wasn't going to say, but.
Obviously, you're all aware of our webinars and the series we have, so don't miss our up and coming webinars. We have the next 2 webinars where we'll be diving deeper into the Procurement Act and explore essential commercial strategies. So we'll be covering key topics including planning, governance, assurance and resources. So these webinars are a fantastic opportunity to equip yourself and your team with the knowledge needed to navigate the new regulations. Plus, we'll discuss how to engage senior stakeholders to ensure everyone is aligned and informed. So we have put the link in the chat there to book yourself on the next webinars. So we're just going to have a look back at the chat questions that we need to answer, Nathan.
Hit me.
Yeah, so this one was around above threshold contracts. So I think it was when you were talking about open procedures As a MAT, we have an exemption for the 30k threshold.
Yep. Yes. Yes, yeah. So there is something called below threshold tender requirements that doesn't apply to schools. So this is something I'll probably pick up on the more in-depth training. But yes, over threshold. So every 2 years, the Cabinet Office put out or government put out a new thresholds for goods, services, and works. So obviously the rigors of the full Procurement Act apply to those that are over the threshold. I'd say the new Procurement Act does include more rigour for below thresholds. However, for schools, that's not necessarily applicable. So yes, I think is a response to that.
Okay, the next one is around the notices, and if they were to use a framework or a dynamic purchasing system, and they were using procurement consultants, would the procurement consultants sort all these notices out?
Depends what's in your contract with the procurement consultant. So if you've asked them to do that, then yes, they would do that on your behalf, I would imagine. Again, if you're accessing an existing framework or DPS that's been procured under the current or PCR 15 regs, then obviously some of these new notices wouldn't apply anyway, because the further competition or the contract awarded through the framework and the DPS would be under the old regulations. So the current one. So it's still the rigor of the current regulations around standstill and the debriefing, etc. But some of the new notices wouldn't apply. So again, remember, it's only those which have been procured post 24th of February.
Okay, this one's related to the contract register. Do they need to put all their contracts on the register or only high value ones?
It's up to you. I mean, I would, as a procurement person, try and set a limit. I mean, depends where you want visibility. I mean, one of the risks is that if you don't go low enough, then you could miss those repeat purchases. So what often can happen is there's individual spends and contracts that arise from lots of repeat ad hoc purchases, and individually they may only be 5k 10k here and there, you know, over a number of months or whatever. However, over a period of time, that can add up to. So I think, again, this is where your spend analysis would help. So I mean, I would maybe set a threshold of around 25,000. Any contracts over 25,000, it's something what we call the Pareto analysis, which again I won't go into too much detail, but look at Pareto. Basically you want to try and have, you know, visibility over 80% of your spend, which typically, but having an understanding of under that, I mean, there's a lot of tail spend that can go missed, and that often is where you can get a lot of savings, actually.
Yes, indeed, yeah. And also it depends what's also in your financial policy around this as well.
Yeah, true. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. With regards, in the chat we did put in a link to our contract register, which is free to access and use. And somebody also asked about, they didn't attend the last webinar, to point them in the right direction of resource websites. Again, if you register on our website, you'll get access to a portal and you can find other key pieces of information in there, in that portal, which is actually getting an update. So if you haven't been on it for a while, do keep checking it back in to see what updates are happening.
It's all change, as I said at the start.
Yes, indeed. That one, that's that. Sorry, I'm just reading through them. I'm going to be new to public procurement in January and have been asked to join for my new role. I do currently work in procurement. Will this training be too complex for a new public procurement person? So this is to do with the training that we're going to be delivering.
I don't think so. I think everybody's sort of coming from a starting point, and I mean, I think it'll be fine. I think we'll try and make it as accessible as possible. I think the reality is there's not many people who are dedicated to procurement in the education sector, you know, as in, professional procurement people. Some large mats may have. So I think everybody's coming from a standing point of, this isn't full time for them. So that's recognised, and I'll make it accessible accordingly.
Okay. One question was, will new policy guidance be sent out?
Yes, always. So Cabinet Office put out what's called procurement policy updates or procurement policy notices, PPNs. That continues to be the case. Like I say, we're expecting updates on the National Procurement Policy Statement. There's stuff coming out all the time. I mean, yeah. Like I say, if you was to Google transforming public procurement, there is a landing page there. You can sign up for alerts. On there, there's guidance documents. There's bits and pieces in there which I think you'll find helpful. So again, there is a certain amount of personal responsibility around looking and finding this stuff. So have a look and see what you can find. So transforming public procurement.
Next one is threshold for tender down to trust discretion, or what is the regulated requirement?
Okay, so the threshold for goods and services, I think, is around 214,000, but it includes VAT. So just be aware. For works, it's way up into the 5 millions. So again, that was last updated, I think, 1st of Jan 24. I don't know, but my assumption is it's every 2 years. So I think the next threshold update would be 1st of Jan 26. But it's a case of you have to keep an eye on what comes out of Cabinet Office on that. So, and that's whole life spend. So what's the total spend over the duration of the contract? And I always say it doesn't take a lot. 50 grand a year, 5-year contract. Well, that's 250. Well, there you go. You're sort of over the threshold. So it's not just the annual spend; it's the whole life spend. So, okay.
And have we got time for some more, Nathan?
Just squeeze another one in.
Okay, and how long will we have to place transparency notice on the CDP for exam boards where there's only one provider?
Yeah, good question. That's a little bit more technical in terms of where there's one provider, and I think obviously that's where I think there needs to be a little bit more review. And I mean, within the regulations, there will be provisions, like I said, around direct award, where for there is only one potential provider, but it's a difficult one to answer in this session with a minute. In terms of transparency, I would always say do that within at least 30 days. I can't remember what the specific requirement is, but yeah, where you've made a decision. I'm just having a look at my board of interest here. Yeah, it doesn't. Section 44 of the new Procurement Act, transparency notice. Yes, I'd have to come back to you on the specific timetable, but I think at the moment 30 days is the sort of the rule of thumb. So I don't think you'd be far wrong with that. But the question over single supplier without going out to competition is a little bit more complex, and you'd need a bit more advice on that.
Thank you, Nathan.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us today, and as always, thank you for interacting with our chat, and it has been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, I always say it's nearly that Christmas time, Nathan.
40 days.
40 days. 40 days, dearie me.
Where does time go? Where does it go? It speeds up as you get older, doesn't it? That's
it does
scary
indeed.
thing.
Yes. Hopefully everybody would like to, or hopefully we'll see you at our next training session. If you've booked yourself onto that, that would be appreciated.
Okie dokie.
If anybody's at any events, the Schools Academy show or ISBIL in the next couple of weeks, please do come and find me because I will be there. It'd be great to meet some of you all in person.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Yes, we'll see you on the next webinar. Take care. Look after yourselves.